I'm the Senior Vice President for Marketing, Public Affairs, and Government Relations at HealthQuest. Our Chairman, Steve Salam, could not be with us this evening. Also unable to join us tonight are the Reverend Jesse Bottoms, who's the pastor of the Beulah Baptist Church right across the street here in the city of Poughkeepsie. Dr. John Doherty was not able to join us at the last minute tonight. Doc, as he's known, former police officer in the city of Poughkeepsie and chair of the Criminal Justice Department at Marist for many, many years. However, with us tonight, and I don't see John Cradell, also Judge Cradell, yet, but he may be coming in because he's coming all the way in from Northeast. So we'll see if John is able to join us tonight. But with us today are members of the committee, David Freeman, Chair of Architecture and Construction Technology at Dutchess Community College, Audra Gertie, Executive Vice President and CFO of the Dutchess County Regional Chamber of Commerce, Reverend Tyler Jones, pastor of St. Paul's Episcopal Church in the city of Poughkeepsie, right across the street. I almost parked in there, Tyler, but I parked on the street tonight. Joe Lepore, the owner of LCS Facility Group, Bob Mallory, who is a community advocate and former City of Poughkeepsie Common Council member in whose ward the project was located, Jim Hammond, former Dutchess County legislator, and Andrew O'Grady, Executive Director of the Mental Health of America, Dutchess County. So I'd like to thank them for joining us this evening. We had several meetings in 2015 and plan to have more meetings if and when the Justice and Transition Center project is approved by the Dutchess County Legislature on March 21st. We do not intend to hold monthly EAG meetings going forward, but we will schedule them periodically to receive updates on the progress of the project during design and construction of the Law Enforcement Center, the Justice and Transition Center, and any other activities in and around the site, should they be approved. As volunteers, we've signed on to help promote the information and details of this project, and at the same time, to be community conduits to ensure that your input is included. Please use us. We want to be your liaison on this project with county government. We also believe in transparency and the free flow of information among our committee members and between our group and the general public. And to ensure that, we have all of our information about all the meetings that we've had to date and all of our deliberations that can be found on the Dutchess County JTC website, which is www.dutchessny.gov/DCJTC. There is also a page for this project on Facebook. You can like that one if you'd like. Both sites provide project updates. Tonight we're going to have a presentation on this project. I have seen it a couple of times already. It is extremely comprehensive, which is good. Rather be over-informed than under-informed. It presents what's being proposed, why and how it will impact the county financially and regarding the criminal justice system in Dutchess. The final decision on this project, again, will not be made until March 21st at a special meeting of the Dutchess County Legislature. Several other meetings are being held around the county, and there is a sheet in the back listing them. You may pick it up before leaving this evening. So there are meetings scheduled in LaGrangeville, Amenia, Beacon, Hyde Park, and Paulding. So after tonight's presentation, there will be a question and answer session first for the EAG members, and then following that, we will begin an open forum allowing the public to ask questions about the presentation or the project in general. County Executive Molinaro is here tonight. He will facilitate that session, although we have many other individuals who are involved in this project and have been from the very beginning, and they may be called upon to provide specific information to your questions. One of our goals tonight is to have an orderly and civil discussion. It's an opportunity to ask questions and get answers. We have a list from which we will work, so we know how many people would like to speak. I ask that you please sign up if you would like to ask a question. Julia, wave Julia, hi, in the back, and Colleen, hi. They have the sign-up sheets that you can add your name to, and we'll call you in order in which you signed up. So if I may, please, I'd like to call upon Deputy County Executive Bill O'Neill to begin tonight's presentation. Bill?
Well, good evening, and thank you, Tim. I appreciate your efforts here, and I appreciate the entire executive or the external advisory group for being the liaisons to the community, because this is, we believe, a very, very important project. On February 4th, as Tim mentioned, I did present to the Dutchess County Legislature our plan for the Dutchess County Justice and Transition Center, and that presentation lasted about 55 minutes. I've scaled that presentation back today to hopefully not more than about 30 minutes. But if you are interested, you can see the entire presentation on the legislative page of the county website, which again is dutchessny.gov. And the PowerPoint presentation that was done is available under the website, the same website, under the Dutchess County Justice and Transition page. Now, the reason I've scaled it back is so that we can have the public forum tonight and we can get to you asking your questions. So with that, let me start by clarifying something, and that may not be realized by everyone, and that is that Dutchess County, like all counties in New York State, is mandated to have a jail. And that jail carries a joint responsibility. Actually, it's the sheriff who's responsible for operating it, and the county executive is, as the chief administrative officer, is responsible for making sure the bills get paid. As you know, that joint responsibility didn't always work over the years, and we had some issues. And as a result, nothing was done to solve this long-standing problem of too many inmates and not enough jail beds. The State Commission on Corrections, who is the organization that has oversight for all of the county jails in New York State, they became our adversary as a result of our inactivity. But over the past 4 years, we have been able to repair that relationship. Sheriff Butch Anderson, County Executive Molinaro, and then Chairman Rob Rollison went to visit the Commission, and that show of unity and commitment, and their commitment to a lasting solution for Dutchess County had been well received. And the evidence for that is the approval of Dutchess County's use of temporary housing. And we call them pods. They're 4 separate areas that house 50 inmates. And in May of 2015, with the installation of those temporary housing pods, we were able to return virtually all of our inmates to Dutchess County, and we didn't have to house out anymore. That has resulted in, over the last year, a expense reduction of about $1 million, and that's an annual reduction. We've reduced the risk in county liability from excess travel, which is caused by having to transport those inmates long distances. We've made it easier for inmates to meet with their attorneys. It's enabled us to begin provide rehabilitation programs to the inmates while also giving our probation department the opportunity for interaction so that those inmates could be placed in alternatives to incarceration, if appropriate. And it also made it easier for families to have contact with the inmates, and that has proved to be beneficial in the rehabilitation process. Additionally, since May, we have seen a noticeable decrease in both the average daily population of the jail and in the average length of stay of inmates. But as much as the pods have been a blessing, they are not a panacea. And they are set up a bit like an army barracks with bunk beds. The inmates are in close proximity. There's a lack of privacy, and that environment can cause problems. This solution will work in the short term, but we definitely need a better long-term solution. Now, the COC allowed us to use this temporary solution, or these temporary facilities, because we promised to pursue a permanent solution. And recently we received a letter from the commissioner of the COC, Commissioner Beeline, and he was very clear that if we don't have legislative approval for the continuation of our long-term solution by April 1st, 2016, then they will revoke the waiver, and we will go back to housing out inmates again. Now let's take a look at our current jail facility. This collage of pictures helps to draw attention to the fact that the jail is too old, too inefficient, too unsafe, and too expensive to operate. And I've toured the jail many times, and it's difficult to adequately address the needs of our inmates. Those with mental issues, women, certainly younger inmates, those with substance abuse, those requiring constant supervision. The old section of the jail, as you've seen in these pictures, has poor lighting, horrible ventilation, no space for programming or therapy, and it's staff intensive because of the old design. There are very poor sight lines, and it's unsafe for our correctional officers, and it's just too small. The current jail is made up of the 1984 and the 1995 additions, and it has an approved capacity of 292 beds. However, jail administrators must adhere to a classification system, and that limits what type of inmate can be housed with another. Things like gender, age, risk, etc. And the limitation requires 10%, sometimes up to 20% of the beds to be left unassigned. When we were housing out, this was especially difficult because you had to add swing space because of the constant movement of inmates coming in and out of the jail. Therefore, we ended up with around 250 inmates in the jail at any one time. Again, not counting the pods. In 2014, our average daily population was 474. In 2015, that average ADP decreased to 441. But actually, that's reflecting the impact of not housing out. Those numbers dropped considerably from May when we installed the pods. We also installed mid-year some new initiatives, and those helped to reduce the ADP. So if you do the math, the resulting number of average housing out numbers is between 190 and 225. And actually, one day in 2014, we housed out 270 inmates. Now, 4 years ago, when Mark was running for county executive the first time, he said that we needed to do something about the outdated jail and the housing out problem. And some at that time said that he was going to rush right into construction. But that's not what happened. And here we are 4 years later, and we have yet to put a shovel in the ground. However, in those last 4 years, we did get the temporary solution, and we have done a tremendous amount of analysis. And everything really started when the county executive asked the CJC to provide a full assessment of the county's criminal justice system. And they asked that he be provided with recommendations. And so the result was the CJC needs assessment, which basically had a two-pronged approach. The first, to continue the work that was being done on the ATIs and expand and enhance them where possible. And secondly, to create more capacity. We also had Richie Green come in, a consultant in the jail construction business, and they validated that assessment. But, we've spent much of the time over the last 4 years focused on that first prong, expanding and enhancing our alternatives to incarceration. Now, when we talk about alternatives, we're talking about some 650 individuals who daily would not be in the jail because maybe they've been released on their own recognizance, or maybe or released under some other type of supervision. Perhaps they've been released because they're being electronically monitored, or they're in a substance abuse program like ITAP, or at our transition house, or enrolled in maybe the Women's Reporting Center. But if you add these 650 individuals in ATIs to the approximately 2,500 people that are under the supervision of our probation officers, and then you add the 420 inmates that are actually incarcerated, that means only 13% of those in the Dutchess County criminal justice system are incarcerated. and that is a very low incarceration rate. The national average for incarceration is about 250 people per a 100,000 population. New York State rate's a little lower. It's 215 per 100,000. In Dutchess County, our rate is 140 per 100,000. Again, an extremely low incarceration rate in the state and in the country. But we think we can get even lower. And our efforts currently in terms of providing CIT training to all the law enforcement officers in the county and the stabilization center that we are due to open later this year should help in that regard. Now, the low incarceration rate is due in large part to the extensive number of individuals in those ATI programs. And again, they are being continually enhanced and they are being expanded. But we have reached somewhat of a saturation point. We have a lot of turnover in the jail. And on average, there's 200 new inmates coming in every single month. But we keep diverting a large number of those individuals from incarceration. And it is a dynamic process as people move through the system. But our alternatives to incarceration are successful in a large part due to the work of our Probation and Community Corrections Department, which is run by Mary Ellen Still, who is also the chair of the Criminal Justice Council. And you need to realize that everyone who's newly admitted into the jail is interviewed by one of her probation officers on the day they enter the jail. And we use nationally recognized evidence-based assessment tools to determine the individual's risk. And then we figure the least restrictive program to recommend that individual for. Now, this could be a substance abuse program, if that's what they need. It could be released on their own recognizance, or it could be they need to be in jail. Yes, some people need to stay in jail for the sake of public safety. But with the use of these tools and the thoroughness of our probation officers, they prepare comprehensive reports, and those are done initially and then at various stages in the case, and they come with a recommendation. And with few exceptions, those recommendations are accepted by the judges that are hearing those cases. But remember, it is those judges that remand individuals to jail. They are the ones that set the bail, and they are the ones that need to say it's okay to transfer that inmate from the jail to an alternative. Now, key to our effort is the extensive data analysis that's being performed by our Information Services Department, by jail personnel, and our consultant, Dr. Gary Christensen, who was previously the jail administrator in Dutchess County, and now he's a valuable consultant to the Criminal Justice Council. Over the last few years, we have compiled an extensive amount of information to study the risk levels of our inmate population and the effectiveness of the decisions that are being made regarding ATIs. The data is sorted by jurisdiction of origin, and it has allowed us to focus on the high-intensity areas. For instance, we've identified courts in 3 geographic areas, which in addition to county court, represent well over half the inmate population. And so we've taken actions to address the identified systemic issues and improve the effectiveness of the system. In the city of Beacon, we support a drug court, which also has a domestic violence component. And probation officers assigned to the court provide pretrial release assessment information, and progress reporting as well. And our focus has been to restore these individuals through an intensely individual process. We have a felony drug court at the county level, and we would consider a Poughkeepsie drug court. But understand that needs to be approved and supported by the Office of Court Administration, and these courts are very resource intensive. But we continue to pursue them. We also are pursuing a mental health court in the county as well. In the city of Poughkeepsie, where about 1/3 of the pretrial caseload originates, in partnership with the city judges, we've established a Saturday arraignment pilot, and that reduces those weekend backlog of cases. In that process, we've also reduced jail days. Since it was implemented in mid-2015, about 20 individuals have been kept from incarceration. In the town of Poughkeepsie, where the largest number of misdemeanors occur, we've started a program called the Consolidated Hybrid Intern Program, or CHIP. And it's actually a blend of pretrial supervision and the interim supervision that's provided through probation. Basically, it's a contract that's drafted and signed by the defendant, the probation officer, and the judge. And there's a specific plea, and the case is then adjourned for 12 months. If the defendant successfully completes the supervision period, then the original plea is withdrawn, and the defendant will get a reduced charge. This was implemented in mid-2015 as well, and we have about 25 contracts on the books. And what's working well in the town has now created interest from many other courts throughout the county. One of the ATI areas where we have seen tremendous success is in women's services. We created a women's reporting center with a DCJS grant, and in conjunction with our transition housing partner, Project Moore. And this is actually the result of our foundational work on women issues with the Center for Effective Public Policy and the National Resource Center on Justice-Involved Women. And as a matter of fact, we helped develop and then we piloted ION, which is a needs assessment inventory, and it's now used at the Women's Center. Together with Marty Lynch and Mary Haight from Project Moore, we're changing the lives of women who would otherwise be in jail. And through cognitive training, case management, and mentoring, combined with substance abuse programs, with job training, and finding housing and daycare services when necessary, 80 women have completed this program in 2015, and 121 in total since it started in May of 2014. Lastly, I'd like to mention a couple of youth-based programs. And we have several hundred kids between the ages of 7 and 17, although they're juveniles, they are technically in the criminal justice system. They don't impact our jail numbers, not yet. And we have many good programs that are focused on turning youth lives around. But there's two here that I want to mention. The first is Teen Intervene, and the second, the Restorative Justice for Youth model. Teen Intervene is a cognitive behavioral program that's aimed at 13 to 17-year-olds. The ones that show early signs of substance abuse issues. It's an evidence-based curriculum, and it uses motivational enhancement, stages of change, and cognitive approaches to help youth make healthier choices. It has been provided in both a one-on-one setting as well as in small groups. And since implementing it in 2015, we've had about 20 youth go through the program. Restorative Justice works through empathy work groups that are led by probation officers. And the purpose of the groups is to help juveniles understand the harm that they've done to their victims and to their community. And it helps them realize the impact of their behavior. It creates ways for them to apologize and then has them perform community service connected to the nature of their offense. And this has proven to be valuable and a successful process. And over the past few years, we've had some 465 youth go through this program. So we are looking at all aspects of the criminal justice system. And if we can reduce the number of youth that are entering the system, then we'll need less jail cells in the future. And in addition, Mark explained at the State of the County address, we are including funding for the most comprehensive youth services study ever undertaken. And this is to keep our youth from becoming inmates. But we also need to look seriously at the second prong, because we definitely need more capacity. And as much effort as we were putting into the ATIs and systemic change, we cannot overlook the fact that in addition to needing a better facility to incarcerate those needing to be incarcerated, we do not have the capacity to handle our average daily population. And that's why in 2013, in a bipartisan vote, the county legislature appropriated $1.2 million for the design, planning, and cost analysis studies to create the project definition and the plans for the functional designs of a new facility. Now we've done this and we are ready to move forward. But our first challenge in that was sizing the facility. In the past, there were several attempts to create models that would predict the number of inmates that the county would need to accommodate in the future. And they all showed this continued growth curve, partially tied to expected population growth. Some gave adherence to crime statistics, but they all showed this pretty steep increase. This time we have done a simple analysis which starts with our current status, and then it builds flexibility to grow if needed or scale back if that is warranted. In 2016, we are currently trending at about 420 inmates. That's our average daily population, which has really, as I said before, shown a decrease since we stopped housing out. But we see that kind of leveling off now. At any rate, it was a very logical starting point. And although 420 is the inmate count, if we allow for that classification issue, then we would need a facility close to in the 500-bed range. And appropriately, that's what we have now. We have 292 beds in the old jail, in the 90s and 80s section. And then we have another 200 beds in the pods. That totals 492 beds. Now, this facility will not be operational until 2021. And then we expect a useful life of about 30 years. So a 15% growth factor is really quite modest. The past two facilities that we built were too small the day they were open, and we don't want that to happen again. And as the COC has indicated, they believe we need to accommodate for growth. And so they've accepted our modest addition of 15%. And therefore, our working number is 569 beds. Now, this proposed facility will accommodate that number, and it's been divided into the various units or pods. And those sizes range from 24 beds to 48 beds, with the intent to meet the various needs of the different types of inmates that are in the jail. But there are two considerations which will provide us the flexibility to scale back that size. First, we have a third floor with two 36-bed units that we could remove, and I'll show you how in a minute. And actually, we could delay that building that section, and if needed, we could add it at a later date. But the good news is that we don't have to make that decision at this time. We will not start the design until 2017, and we can delay that decision and just see how the systemic and ATI efforts are faring. But if we do forego that third floor, in addition to the considerable expense reduction, we would decrease our size by 72. And that would mean we're actually building a 497-bed facility, which basically accommodates where we are today. The second consideration is the 1995 edition. And as you'll see, this section could be cordoned off and made a separate facility. And if sometime in the future we can reduce the inmate population even further, then we could decommission those beds, and then we could use this section for some other use. A mental health facility for the homeless, a transition center, a drug rehab, some combination thereof. But we would not need COs to staff it, and that would provide additional operational expense relief. It would also bring us to 397 beds, or 469 if we had built the 72 beds. But at 397 beds, our average daily population would need to be in the low 300s. I don't know that we can get the jail size down, or the jail population down that low. But we have the options if we can. So we believe that this sizing makes the most sense. And of course, most important, the updated facility will enable us to be more effective in rehabilitating our inmates, as opposed to just providing a place to warehouse. Now, for perspective, this aerial view shows the sheriff's office that was built in 1945. And actually, the sheriff's office was actually built in two stages. It started in 1920, and then the most current was 1945. And then the 1984 buildings you can see there next to it. And then the 1995 section is the other addition. And this was taken before we added the pods, but the pods were located in that parking area just below the 1995 section. We did look at a number of other potential areas to locate our new facility, but we needed to consider the need for municipal water and sewer. We needed to consider the closeness to the city and the county courts. And there were many NIMBY concerns as well. And all that led us back to North Hamilton Street. Actually, in the needs assessment, we had two potential sites, but the Hudson River Site Center, which was one of them, was eliminated as a possibility for economic development reasons. And even this existing site that we're looking at, it would not have worked except for the Taylor manufacturing property becoming available and then our purchasing that. And now this site can accommodate the project. Now, here you see a picture of the existing sheriff's building, which in addition to being very old and inefficient, is in need of a lot of maintenance. And it's also located on the very spot we need to build part of the new facility. So we need a plan for a phased construction of demolishing the sheriff's office as well as the 1984 section of the jail. And so what we're going to be doing is demolishing, building, moving a couple of times. Now this site overview gives you a perspective of the surrounding land use. Interestingly, it is mostly, the pink area is commercial and industrial. The residential actually surrounds that area. You can also see the open space areas that are represent the rail trail and the waterways. There's also a spur of the CSX rail line that runs along the back end of the property, and that makes connections to the walkway over the Hudson and also to the Dutchess rail trail, which we believe could provide an opportunity to improve the surrounding areas. Here you see the proposed site plan and the location of the facilities. Now, there weren't a whole lot of options of how to get everything on this site. And this diagram also will show you what we've tried to do with the landscaping plans to create an enhanced visual presentation and additional green space buffer on both North Hamilton and Parker Avenue. Currently, the grounds around the facility are very well cared for, and we think that these additions will make it even more so. There's also a number of storage buildings that would be required in the back, and the triangle on the left, which is now a gravel parking area, has been identified as a potential housing facility which may be available under a federal funding project. But that is still a future opportunity. This slide shows the various functional areas of the jail. Now, I caution you that this is not how all of these areas will look necessarily. We've conducted the extensive analysis of both the jail and the sheriff's office component, and we looked at the logical adjacencies and what is now causing inefficiencies. We've identified the necessary space, and that's been allocated and blocked in for all the required functions. But the final architectural designs could end up being somewhat different. We just wanted to make sure that the footprint accommodates the needs. We estimated the square footage. We used that to determine the expected cost. But here you can see the ground floor where will be the services for food service, laundry, maintenance, intake, visitation. And part of the site, the space on the left that you see there, the gold color, is for staff support and administration. That is below the 100 beds from the 1995 edition. And there's also a hearing room in there, and that space could be available for a central arraignment court if we can get all the parties to agree and all the necessary things done for that. But we have the space available if that becomes a possibility. And part of the site placement issue was parking. And that was the biggest issue when we had the public hearing here. The neighbors in the public session complained about not having parking on the street. So we have taken pains to make sure that all the parking could be available on the site. Now here are some examples of cell blocks, and you can see the re-entry versus the general population, and it displays the different unit constructions. They are both pod designs, not to be confused with the temporary pods, but it's where virtually all the activity occurs in this space so that inmate transport is kept to a minimum. And the sight lines and direct management is better, which optimizes the efficiency and thereby will reduce staffing costs. And as you can see in the re-entry area, where the Restart program will be operational, we have the needed programming space. By the way, the Restart program in the jail is the work of our Special Populations Work Group, which was chaired by Chief Ron Knapp and facilitated by our consultant Kevin Warwick. This is addressing the needs of our higher risk inmates. And what we're doing is trying to break that cycle of reoffending. And we've initiated interaction with community agencies to ensure that support groups are available with a keen focus on aftercare that can be provided to the inmates when they return to the community. And we're also looking at ways to increase and improve job opportunities for those individuals. Additionally, Kevin and the group have provided input on how best to construct the new jail units so that we're effectively addressing the various issues of each group. We're expanding the health center in the health facility in the center, and we are modernizing it. The current space, if you've had the opportunity to tour the jail, is very small and inefficient. And these new 36 beds will enable us to keep many inmates local rather than have to send them to the hospital, where again, staffing requirements require that we add a couple more COs. And we can also deal better with serious mental health issues and inmates who are requiring constant supervision, separating them from the general population units and providing for both male and female. And these 36 beds are a part of the 569 bed total that we are proposing. As I mentioned, we will have options to decrease the size of the facility. And if the numbers warrant, we will consider decommissioning those 100 beds in the 1995 section. The ground floor will have a separate entrance, as you can see over on that left, and access to an elevator which would take you up to the second floor. And that would allow us to use the second floor for another use. The third floor housing unit that you see on the bottom contains a total of 72 beds in 2 units, and which I said before could be eliminated from the design or added at a later date if needed. And we will monitor the ADP between now and when we need to make that decision in 2017. The proposed law enforcement center is in the Taylor building. Now we did go back and forth on whether to adaptively reuse it or not. Much of the space is not usable as is, but some of the brickwork and the high ceilings and the exposed beams and the brick-faced window areas do present some great options for public access. Most of the space will be newly built, and it will replace the highly inefficient and unsafe aspects of the current sheriff's office. There will be 2 floors with a clear separation between the areas for public access and the sheriff deputy's area. The adaptive reuse in the front public space areas will create a very presentable streetscape, which blends in well with the intent of the walkway district and hopefully will be a catalyst to get other investors moving to make Parker Avenue the kind of tourist setting that will benefit the city and the county as a whole. Again, this is merely a rendering of what could be. The actual design will be completed by the architects that are still to be hired and who will then create that final design. As I said earlier, we believe that a green space behind the jail can be developed and make a better connection for the public to the walkway, the Dutchess Rail Trail, and the Falkhill Creek. And perhaps a trail extending down to the river, and maybe a trail extending through the city out to Smith Street and wrapping around back to College Hill. We believe this project will enhance the area and help create the needed connections and catalysts to advance economic development and improve the city of Poughkeepsie, improvement in the city of Poughkeepsie. Now, our timeline is ambitious, considering the phased approach necessary with this site. We need to demolish and restore the Taylor building, then move the sheriff into that building. And then we'll demolish the existing sheriff's office and build a new wing for the support functions and inmate housing on that spot. And then once we've moved the support functions and the inmates into that newly constructed space, we'll demolish the 84 section where those functions and inmates were previously. At that same time, we'll move the inmates in from the pods, we'll dismantle the pods, and finish the parking area in that spot. And then finally, we'll renovate the 95 section and make the connection into the new facility. So just let me recap really quickly. The Justice and Transition Center will be just shy of 300,000 square feet. It will be a 569-bed facility, which incorporates the 100 beds from the 95 edition. The new design will provide greater efficiency, especially as it relates to staffing. And we will have adequate space to continue our programming efforts with expansion to increase the number of inmates in our programs. The Law Enforcement Center will be a 56,000 square foot facility and utilize part of the existing Taylor building. It will provide greater and easier public access and have improved efficiency and security. In terms of the timeline, assuming legislative approval at the special meeting on March 21st, the design of the Law Enforcement Center will begin in May of 2016, and that should allow construction of the Law Enforcement Center to start in early 17 and be done by spring of 18. The design of the Justice and Transition Center will then begin in early 2017. Of course, this will require COC approval, and then the construction of the Justice and Transition Center would begin in September of 2018 and run through mid-2020. So, what will it cost? What you're going to see, and what we've said all along, is that the debt service for this project is basically a wash with the cost of housing out inmates. And that really is the alternative. There's only two. And if we do not proceed with this project, the COC will require us to abandon the temporary housing units. And then we'll house out units in other county jails. But in addition to the cost of the housing out, we will have the continued cost of the temporary housing units for about another 4 years. But if we build, we get the operational cost savings from the decreased staffing needs. So here's what the cost will be for the Law Enforcement Center. The total cost is $36.5 million. However, built into that number is $2.7 million in contingency and $1.3 million to cover escalation costs, since it will be several months before we actually start construction. And we will be using most of the existing furniture and fixtures, but there's an additional $500,000 for that. And then the architectural design fees are about $3.8 million. And we believe the bulletproof glass should be used on all external glass. The Justice and Transition Center cost is $154 million. But here we have $10.5 million for contingency and another $9.3 million for escalation. Furniture, fixture, and equipment needs in the jail are about $1.1 million, with $12.7 million for design. The third floor option of the 72 beds has a cost of about $15 million, and we are recommending that an auditor be brought on board to oversee the accounting of the entire project. Now, combined, the project is estimated to cost, with the youth and special populations analysis dollars that I mentioned, and the estimated bond issuing costs at around $192 million. And this will produce an annual principal and interest debt service of $9.9 million. Now, to evaluate the real impact of this project, we need to compare what happens if we build to what happens if we don't. Because, as I said, those are really the two options that we're faced with. And then we have to pick a time frame which makes sense to do the comparison. And that obvious time frame is when the facility is built and occupied, because it's then we can realize the operational savings. So that would be 2021, which will be our first full year of operation. And this is where the impact of the staffing changes will take full effect. We believe this is a conservative estimate of what the expenses will be in 2021 if we do not build the new facility. Conversely, we think this is a worst-case scenario of the 2021 expenses if we do build the Justice and Transition Center. Now, the first column shows it's about $47 million if we don't build, and the big difference is the housing out costs, combined with the transport costs related to the housing out. These totaled $8.2 million in 2014. So the 3% yearly increase that we've described is very reasonable. And that brings it to about $10.4 million, and obviously that exceeds the $9.9 million in debt service. With the new building, there will be some utility savings from the efficiencies of the new building, but the big savings is in staffing. We believe that a 3-to-1 CO to inmate ratio is very achievable. In many new jails, that's the low number. So we've taken a very conservative approach. Potentially, we can get a much better ratio. But at 3-to-1, we will need only 190 COs. We now have 233. And that means a decrease of 40 COs. And that's represented in the difference between the $24.8 million and the $20.5 million. With a modest increase in overtime, the savings is almost $5 million annually. Now, food and medical care will be higher in the Justice and Transition Center model because when we house out inmates, those costs are included in the housing out fee. And then we've kept the admin and other expense lines constant, though we do believe additional savings could be expected here as well. But bottom line, the difference in operational costs between the two scenarios before debt service is $13.6 million. Now, when you apply the debt service, and there is some debt service included for the existing jail option as well because of the serious maintenance issue that would need to be addressed, but the average annual savings between the two options is $5.3 million to our benefit. And that is an annual difference, and that will increase over time. A concern, though, is how do we fund the project over the next several years before we begin realizing the savings from the new facility? And the answer is bond anticipation notes, or bands as they're called. And each year we will borrow on an annual basis. Using the bands, we pay only interest on the funds borrowed to date. And the interest rates for bands are much lower, and over the 4 years, this will be the debt service that we will have to incur. And we believe that we can absorb that cost into our annual operating budget without having to increase the tax levy. And once the project is completed, we will then bond the entire amount, and our estimated annual debt payment is $9.9 million over 27 years. Now, this is not a unique method for financing. Most large construction projects that are multi-year are handled this way, especially when there is an expected operational savings to be realized at the conclusion of the construction. So, in summary, we see that we have a very limited and very manageable short-term fiscal impact. We have cost avoidance beginning in 2021 of about $13.6 million. And there's a savings versus the option of not building of $5.3 million per year. We believe this is the best option for Dutchess County. It'll improve our justice system in Dutchess County while ensuring public safety. It'll address the needs of our victims while effectively and efficiently changing both the behavioral and criminogenic issues of the offenders. And it will maintain our fiscal stability while creating additional savings to fund needed programs. So I thank you for your attention. I tried to get it done in 30 minutes, which I was almost able to do. At this time, I'm going to take questions just from the EAG, and then we'll move to the public forum. Members of the EAG, questions?
Hi, I'm Andrew O'Brady. I have a few questions from people in the community who have asked me to bring a few things up. So, good time, right? All right,
Okay.
Here we go.
I may ask the county executive to
All
grab
right.
a microphone.
You answered the question about, somebody said, can you build 2 stories and hold off on a third? But that was kind of addressed in your presentation. concern that if there are, this is a concern that's been brought up to me. The concern is that if there are more beds available in the jail, that those high numbers of ATI people we have will decrease because people will be quicker to fill the beds. Can we get some assurance?
I don't believe that's the case. I think, the probation officers do a very detailed workup, and they use very sophisticated risk analysis tools. And if the outcome of that says this person needs to be in a setting to address a behavioral issue, or if their risk is such that they can, be released on some kind of supervision, that's what they're going to do. We have no desire to put the inmate in jail. I would also add that, these comprehensive analysis that are done, like 99% of the time, the judge will take the recommendation. Maybe I'm exaggerating that. Maybe it's 98.7. But in the overwhelming majority, the probation officer is able to convince the judge, because of these detailed workups, that this is where this individual should be. So I don't think that's going to change. But I would also add that we have an incentive to bring the numbers down. Because if we can get into the low 300s and we can decommission those beds, not only do we have the benefit of using that facility for another purpose, we're going to decrease the number of COs as well. Because if the number of licensed beds or certified beds is under 400, then you use that 3-to-1 ratio and we decrease the number of COs as well. So our operational savings becomes even greater. And as we see that operational savings, we can put that into, part of it, we can put into programs. I know part of it, the public, or the taxpayers would like to see come back to them. So if we can get that money and share between taxpayer relief and programs for individuals that need help, that's a win-win.
Great. The central arraignment court, if that can happen inside the jail, is there an estimate on how many beds that might how much that might reduce the population?
I'm going to ask that you hold that question until the experts get up here, and there's a couple of people that could answer that much better. But this is not a panacea. I mean, everybody talks about, the centralized arraignment, that this is going to solve the problems of the world. It creates a lot of problems. Getting there is a big hurdle, and, there's a whole lot of people that have to agree to it. Mark can't just wave his hand and say, boom, centralized arraignment. It doesn't happen that way. Office of Court Administration is involved, all the judges in the local area involved. It's complicated, but there are people that can kind of take you through that a little bit better than I.
Okay, and the last question relates to your presentation. The band payments at the end that you talked about, I did the quick math, probably got it wrong, but looked like it was about $7.8 million over the next 5 years that you would take on, and you only have to pay back the interest.
Yes.
So the $7.8 million left over, was that included in your numbers just prior to that, about the $5.3 million per year savings?
No. The $5.3 million savings happens in 2021. Up until that time, we would absorb that into our operating budget.
So you would try to hit it, you try to take care of it each year as you want. You wouldn't just defer it until...
That's correct. Okay. But in the analysis and the comparison, I started 2021. Understand, if we don't do this, then in 2016, we start housing out again.
Right.
And so annualized 8.2, next year 9 point what, next year 10. So those expenses have to then be included. So if you wanted to do the comparison, I'm going to spend $8 million over 4 years. But if I'm housing people out, I'm spending about $8 to $10 million each year. Right. So that's the comparison.
We can't keep housing people out. I mean, it's not good for the inmate either. Okay, thank you.
What?
You had mentioned the law enforcement building is 56,000 square feet. What is the approximate square footage you use to estimate the Justice Transition Center?
I think Justice Transition Center in total is 297,000 square feet.
Have you done any comparisons on a national construction cost? on average to see if we're in line with what you're predicting the budget to be for the build out?
We have, and Ken Ritchie from Ritchie Green, when he comes up here, I asked that question, and he's done the comparison, and he can give you the, who we compare to. But we compare very favorable. We're in right on a line here. We kind of sometimes get, with the New York City numbers and sometimes with the upstate numbers, but it's kind of right on the line. So, when you look at the comparison, I think we're favorable in terms of the square footage. And a lot's going to depend on when the construction begins, because this is, when you bid it out, it's low bid. So, things are competitive, maybe we get a better deal. And if things are, really doing well, then maybe we don't. So we're estimating, and that's where the contingency numbers come in. Is that good?
Thank you for the presentation. I'm an advocate of alternatives to incarceration, as you're probably aware, and I was very impressed. I realize that. I was very impressed by the lower rates of incarceration that we have in Dutchess County compared to other parts of the state, other parts of the nation. Have we done has an analysis been done of the extent to which we've exhausted all ATI opportunities? I know we're doing a lot. I've gotten a rundown. I'm delighted. But is there more to be done in that realm that might give us a cushion as we pursue alternatives in the future?
I think there's always something that we can do better. But I think we have reached a bit of a saturation point. Mary Ellen still tells me that twice a day her probation officers are over there looking at people in the jail and seeing, is there something we can do to move this person out of jail and into an alternative? But the fact of the matter is that there are people that are better placed in jail, because when they are not in jail, they will reoffend. And, people can tell you that a lot of the reoffense isn't, they aren't arrested for it. There's a lot of reoffending that goes on before they get arrested. And so there's a lot of victims. And that's what the risk models tell us. And again, I allow Mary Ellen to speak a little about that. But our probation officers do a thorough analysis of every person in the jail, and they are constantly looking at that. And if we can get somebody out of jail, we normally do. Now, are there some that, perhaps we can, I'm sure there are. Nothing is perfect. But we do a pretty good job. And when you have 650 people in alternatives to incarceration, versus 420, and actually today I think it was 402, that's a pretty good ratio. So I think we're doing it. Can we do it better? Sure. There's always ways you can do it better. But I put our probation officers up against anybody when it comes to the pretrial work that they do in terms of the analysis to get people out of jail and into an alternative.
Thank you. I have an unrelated question, which has to do with the neighborhood and its concerns. Have they had an opportunity to be exposed to the new designs and comment on them? That's why we're here.
We're here. Now, we did kind of talk through some of that at the last meeting, and we have had several opportunities to see where we were headed. But this is the first time that we've shown the actual plan that we're going out to get a designer to come in and design. But Joe?
Bill, thank you for the great presentation. People question sometimes energy savings, red, green roof, solar panels. In your presentation, you didn't talk about that. Can you just elaborate more?
I didn't, but in the RFP that we sent out, and that RFP is also available, it's online, we have asked for the designers to look at all reasonable ways that we could get energy savings. We're not looking to go leads. We're not, trying to, make this an expense, but we will look at energy efficiency ways. Solar could be one of those ways. If the designer can come up with those ideas and put those into the mix and they can be cost effective, absolutely.
Thank you. For the ATIs, how often does the county receive and review the reports from ATIs to know how productive they are, assessments of what changes could be made?
Again, I'm going to let Mary Ellen answer that question because she manages that. But there is a number of management programs that she has, and I'm not sure the exact number, but they have meetings, supervisors meeting with probation officers, reviewing cases on a regular basis. Is it weekly?
We have weekly meetings, we also have quality assurance in place, and of course, we have our consultant who looks at all the programs in a broad-based way.
So there is a regular process of what the probation officer is doing, what their caseload is, and how they are doing on that. And Mary Ellen has done some very interesting things in terms of separating and segmenting caseloads so that she can get people that have expertise in areas when you have domestic violence and sex offenders, and so there is a specialization that's there as well. But there is this ongoing management review that they do in probation to make sure that not only is that person at the jail meeting with their those that they're responsible for, looking at their case, and is there any way we can get that person into an alternative? But then the management is reviewing that to make sure that they're doing everything possible. So.
Thank you. And I have a couple things written down. For site plans and all, are we pursuing, we mean the county taxpayers, is the county actually what it is, pursuing federal state dollars for streetscape along North Hamilton streets, and you talked about green space beforehand. Are we pursuing state and federal dollars to help us to enhance those areas? Unless that's part of the construction costs.
Well, the green areas are not part of the construction costs. Mm-hmm. That would be a separate program, and part of that was because of the seeker requirements, and we didn't have a lot of the detail that was necessary to complete that. But yes, we are always looking for grants. We don't have any opportunities that we know of in terms of the capital expense that we're looking at for either the jail facility or the Justice and Transition Center or the law enforcement center. But there are a lot that exist for other things, that transition center idea on that space. Mm-hmm. And then the green space, there's a lot of opportunity there for not only grant money, but also for developers contributing in terms of their development effort. So we are pursuing the green space thing much more aggressively. On the capital side, there's just not a whole lot of dollars out there to build new facilities like this.
All right, and so, but the effort will be made to lease, again, I'll talk about North Hamilton Street and Parker Avenue, that pursuing dollars, additional dollars, in some capacity, maybe not part of our project to design or build this Justice Community Center, Justice Center, but again, enhancing the street level in itself. There have been conversations beforehand that why can't North Hamilton Street be like South Hamilton Street, where it comes down this way? So is the effort going to be made through the county's effort of pursuing additional funding to have this done?
I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. I mean, certainly the municipal grants and the things we're doing in other areas, I think there's a lot of opportunity. It's not in this. I mean, what we're trying to do is fund this and show people how this will be paid and not put a lot of phantom kind of revenue opportunities in that. Now, we'll pursue any grant that we can. There's just not a lot of capital grant opportunities.
And I wasn't assuming, or I didn't want to imply that it was, but I was.
But if we can always get the grant, and we just wouldn't have to borrow the money.
Right.
It's not just looking for commitment on a streetscape. It's not just fair building, but it also is.
Yes.
Right. I mean, it's one thing to design
All right, I was
outside
waiting for
and
this
properly
guy.
green space.
I'm going to say
Give me
that
a little bailout there, would you, boss?
I like watching him squirm a little bit. On the issue of the city, we take very, very seriously what this facility looks like now, what North Hamilton Street looks like now, what Parker looks like now, and how we can enhance it. As you probably know, and I know that you do know this as a former councilman, as we develop the RFP and the plan that you see before you, much of the streetscape and at least what I'll call landscaping and or buffering around the facility was really taken from community conversation that we had with stakeholders over the last 2 years. But I will tell you that at the request of Mayor Rollison, in fact, we were able to finalize the agreement today. At the request of Mayor Rollison, we have added the City of Poughkeepsie as an interested agency in the review process, which means they are provided all of the review documentation and have been provided all of the review documentation, the RFP, environmental assessment forms, schedule, the bond, etc. We've committed to the City Council and the Mayor that should they wish as stakeholders, key stakeholders, to be a part of the design phase, which would come after bond authority should it be given, that they can be a part of those internal discussions so that we satisfy the city's concerns in development. The entire RFP was crafted around the understanding, in particular in Parker, that we provide some consistency within the city's walkway district, which is a new zoning code, and that will be incorporated in the design. And then lastly, because we really love making this presentation, we've offered the City Council, should they wish a separate presentation between now and whenever, we're willing to do that as well. I'm hopeful that Bill can actually get it to 30 minutes, but nevertheless, we've agreed to that and we've committed to that, and the Mayor is conveying that to the City Council tonight.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Two trends that seem to be spreading throughout the country, including New York State, are decriminalization of various drug offenses and, in general, sentencing reforms. Could you speak to how those trends might impact your planning and maybe your planning that has taken place and ongoing?
Not to sound too snarky, but we may need to build more cells. Because if you look at what happened in New York State over the last 10 years, they decriminalized state prisons or decommissioned state prison beds by 6,000. At the exact same time, the Commission on Corrections mandated 6,000 new jail cells in counties. So you're having a transfer here. And, I think George can speak to the increase in the number of parolees that we are seeing in our jail, higher than we've ever seen before. So, yes, there's a decriminalization happening and people are coming out of federal prison, out of state prison, but when they come back home and there is no program that is helping them, they reoffend, and then we have them in the county jail. Now, they may not stay here forever, but, we're going to get them probably for 60 days or 90 days or, maybe most of a year. So there is a real problem with, the decriminalization and the de-mass incarceration that's happening at the federal and state level, but it's coming back on us. And there's not much we can do about that. I mean, we are a holding place for people that are going through their criminal justice system, case. And, so I don't know that those numbers are coming down in our favor. Now, what we are trying to do is bring the numbers down by breaking that cycle of reoffense. Although I don't see us doing that with people that are in state prison. I see that doing that with regular offenders here in our own community who are in the jail 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year because they're constantly reoffending. It's misdemeanor crime, but it's offense, and they end up in jail and they're a risk, and we can't find an alternative for them, so they're in jail. So those are the people that we're trying to put the programs together, both in the jail and then when they return to the community, giving them programming and access to support groups and mentoring and hopefully job help so that we can break that cycle. And when we do, that will definitely have an impact on us. But I'm not convinced that all this stuff that's going on nationally is going to impact us positively.
Can you address why the square footage cost of the law enforcement building is so much higher than the transition center itself for construction?
I'm going to let Ken tell you that, because the law enforcement center higher than the jail, I didn't think that was, I thought it was the other way around.
We can go to those numbers. My recollection is that it's the reverse, that the jail cost per square foot of the jail is higher.
Not on the numbers you presented here.
Mm-hmm.
651 versus 519.
You're adding in the storage building, K-9 facility, and so on. So that's not part of it. That's a separate. Those are two separate elements. My recollection is that the jail is actually slightly higher than the 55,000 square foot building because of all the high security requirements of the jail enclosures and the equipment and the electronics in there. But we can have another, I can refer to my notes and so forth, but that would be that's my recollection from the detail of it.
Thank you. Just for, we're looking at, there's a time frame and all, and I was just wondering that when we have the JTC design, and we expressed before about the third floor being an option, when is it, the state has to give the final approval, and I guess what it is our time frame. When will we know in our design, what's our time frame in our design? It says between December 2016 and May of 2018 for design. When do we have to have a final approval presented to the state where the state will approve our final design, particularly we don't have the third floor as an option?
We do have a project plan that we presented to them, and I believe the design documents we don't have to give them design documents for the law enforcement center.
Right, that again, so you did.
But in May of 17, we've allowed 60 days for the COC to approve the design documents, and then the final approval will be in March 18 for the construction bid documents. So those are the 2 dates.
Yeah, thank you very much. And just finally for myself, will the county be involved at all in, if this project goes through, of ensuring that we're hiring locally between contractors and other employment opportunities for particularly city residents at all?
It's a very good question. The bond resolution that we've sent to the county legislature for consideration articulates what we are allowed to say under state law. New York state law prohibits, and for good reasons and some bad ones, New York state law prohibits directing projects to pre-selected vendors. So you can understand why you would want to not have that happen. So through an open bid process, we have to put out the components of this proposal for open consideration by any vendor. However, the resolution specifically articulates, to the extent we have jurisdiction under state law, we wish to give preference to local vendors and local workforce. We have already shown our willingness to do that. Dutchess County's procurement policy again, to the extent that state law allows it, already provides a local vendor preference. And we were, under state law, able to establish a local vendor registry, which, by the way, provides that any local business that can match a non-local bid within 5%, I think is the number, we can give preference to that local bidder. So to the extent that we can do that, we will. Beyond that, this is a substantial project. We recognize certainly that there is going to be the draw for work, in essence, employment opportunities and construction jobs. We will, to the extent we are able to do this under state law, give preference to local workforce, and our goal is to have local labor participate in the project.
You know, I just want to say, I think that part of the issue is the square footage includes the 95 section. So that's not actually being built. So when you pull that out of the equation, I think the numbers will be, more sensible. But I'm just looking at it. Anyhow, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So there is an RFP out there right now for architectural services
Yes,
for
there is.
Phase A and B. I'm assuming that's the sheriff's office and the state.
On both we have two RFPs in essence, one for the sheriff's office, one for the Justice and Transition Center. However, if an architect wanted to bid both, they can bid both. But there's two separate RFPs out there.
Okay. A project delivery method for this scope would typically be a construction manager, which didn't appear in the cost of the project.
That will be included in the design fees.
Okay.
The design fees will incorporate both the architect and the construction manager.
And then, this is more for Ken, but Means typically lists a much lower cost for jails presently, around $375 per square foot. I'm assuming the construction costs were from Turner Construction was noted?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, the estimated cost, and we did the needs analysis, and they went to each block area and decided how much square footage, what needs to be in each room, what facility, what fixtures, the plumbing, the wiring, it's done by each blocking area, and then they have a square footage amount that gets applied, or a unit cost. There's different ways the units work, and that was the way in which this cost was estimated. So I must admit, I looked at the spreadsheets till my head hurt, and I still can't explain it, but that's why we pay those expensive consultants.
And here he is.
He's really not that expensive. It's very reasonable.
We did a very detailed conceptual design, working closely with George and with Kirk and all of the user groups. So, and then we have an outline specification, and all of that was given to Turner, and they used their cost base and did a takeoff, actual line-by-line takeoff, 22 different sections from demolition. And by the way, that's part of the demolition of the sheriff's office was part of the cost of the law enforcement center. So there are a lot of back and forth there that I'm sitting there thinking about all these factors which we'll talk about. But so it was a very detailed cost estimate that we did. So it wasn't taken out of a book. And also to address your other question from previous, we also asked Turner to look nationally in their database at cost of jails, so we compared it to jail construction in the mid-Atlantic states for comparative type construction, because here we have a complete building, we have a hospital basically, we have kitchen, we have very elaborate programming for all the inmates and so forth. So Turner did that, and we found ourselves to be within the range of in the mid-Atlantic states. So that was another test that we did with Turner. So it's a very detailed estimate. It wasn't taken out of any standard book. For the audience, Means it's kind of an encyclopedia that you might go to, but but for this instance, to create the project cost for something as momentous as this, we needed a lot of detail. We have 47 drawings, and we have 70-page cost estimate.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. And we'll turn the floor over to
Okay, we're going to just take a couple of second break here. Do some coffee and water in the back, and if I could have